Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Microlabs, Micro Knowledge Academy, Micro GTF division, I am Dr. Manjula from the medical team, welcoming you all to this webinar titled Recent Advances in Allergic Rhinitis. So allergic rhinitis is a significant health burden and one of the most common conditions in otolaryngology practice. It is estimated that lives of more than 500 people affected by in the worldwide with allergic rhinitis. So we also know that global prevalence of AR has been shown to vary from 40% in adults to 25% in children. And there is also allergic rhinitis. Some reports say 43%, mixed rhinitis 34%, non-allergic rhinitis 23%. And if you come closer home in India, the reported incidence of allergic rhinitis ranges from 20 to 30% as per the data available. So today we are here to discuss about the recent advances in allergic rhinitis and to present the largest multicentric study done for Avast-M as a combination. It is the first ever study done in India. To share the results of this detail, we have the eminent panel of experts today. I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Ramachandran, MSDLO. He's a professor and HOD of Department of ENT, Medical College, Calicut. He has done MBBS, DLO, MS degree from Calicut Medical College, worked in Government Medical College at Calicut, Trichy and Alleppey as assistant professor, associate professor, and then became former HOD at Calicut Medical College. He has more than 35 years of experience and examiner for various examination in the ENT segment and medical graduation. He's been invited as a speaker in various forum, national, international forum. He has published a research paper both in the national and the international bodies, and he's been associated with several medical associations. Dr. Ramachandran sir is going to moderate this whole program. Sir, Dr. Ramachandran sir, sir, welcome.
I'm sorry
Yes,
for the delay. Okay.
no problem, sir. Welcome you to this program. I just was telling about you as though you don't require any introduction to people over here. It was just a formality that had told the introduction. So warm welcome to you, sir. May I now request you to kindly moderate these proceedings and take it forward, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Manjula. Suma, welcome.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Welcome.
Welcome, sir.
Sorry for the delay.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other teachers are there?
There are already 20 attendees, sir, here.
Any of our teachers?
Dr. Suma would know. Okay, ma'am, can you see in the attendees list? Dr. Anand, Dr. Anusha Arun, Dr. Dayal Narayan, Dr. Dinsha, Dr. Divya Xavier, Dr. Jyoti Srikumar, Dr. Abdul Aziz, Dr. Sanuj, Dr. E.K. Gopalan, Dr. Navya, Dr. Bharata.
Okay.
There are so many people are joining. 28 ho gaya, so.
Okay. My senior faculties are my dear friends. I am extremely happy to join this webinar on the recent advances in the field of allergic rhinitis. Dr. Suma, I don't think she needs any introduction. She's a well-known endoscopic surgeon, a skull-based surgeon, and I am fortunate to have Suma with me for more than 8 years in the Calicut Medical College. So let us hear the recent advances in the allergic rhinitis. And nothing speak as in that introductory note because it's a well-known subject. And forward to Suma, please. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Suma, can you share? Yeah. Yes.
Suma?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. You can see my slides, no?
Yes, ma'am. Clearly. Yes.
Good evening, all. Before I begin, I would like to thank my teacher, Ramayendran sir, and Microlabs for having me here in this webinar on recent advances in allergic rhinitis. And we all know that allergic rhinitis is the 6th most common chronic illness of mankind, and it's present globally, and the incidence is increasing over the years. And it is the most common pediatric chronic illness, but it doesn't, it's often neglected, and it doesn't have the necessary attention is not often often obtained in many of the institutions, many of the conditions. The allergic rhinitis is often underdiagnosed or undiagnosed or undertreated. So let's see the recent advances in allergic rhinitis. When we think about the recent advances, asthma between 400 to 1100 BC, 1100 AD was considered as the effect of the cold weather and moisture, resulting in disequilibrium of body humors, which results in flow of feeble humor from brain through nasal cavities to the lungs. And the treatment considered was discharge of evil humor by letting out or removing blood. So allergy, you can never think of allergy as a standalone entity. We have a large spectrum of diseases as allergy in the whole spectrum of allergy: food allergy, eczema, conjunctivitis, allergic rhinitis, asthma, anaphylaxis. It's a huge spectrum of diseases when you consider allergic rhinitis. And as we all know, it is the 6th most common. So the burden of allergic rhinitis is so huge. More than 600 million people suffer from allergic rhinitis. And the incidence is globally increasing over the last few decades. And the incidence is very high in Asia Pacific region. And in India, 55% of allergy sufferers are having allergic rhinitis. So most of the literature that we know are from Western literature, and we are literally guided by the Western literature that we have. But there are some recent literature in India that 30% of Indian population suffer from allergic rhinitis, and 50% of them develop asthma. So what percent of asthma will have allergic rhinitis? It's not 10%, 20%, 40%, more than 80% of individuals with allergic rhinitis, with asthma, will have allergic rhinitis. So it's a huge percentage. The magnitude is so huge, and this continues to be a topic of debate. And according to this journal, we can see that more than 95% of patients with asthma will have allergic rhinitis. And similarly, asthma is seen in around 40% of patients with allergic rhinitis. So you can see that 38 to 40% of patients with allergic rhinitis will have asthma, and most of the patients with asthma will have allergic rhinitis. So this is the unified concept of nasobronchial allergy or allergic rhinobronchitis. It's difficult to predict which nasal allergy patients are at higher risk of developing airway symptoms, but almost all of them exhibit a bronchial hyperresponsiveness. These are two conditions linked by a common airway, one disease. And rhinitis and asthma represent the global allergy involvement of the airways. When you look at the upper and lower airway together, upper airway inflammation is always associated with some amount of bronchial hyperresponsiveness. And similarly, in lower airway inflammation definitely occurs in asthma, but also in allergic rhinitis patient, even though if they are not symptomatic in almost all cases. So much so that rarely does one hear a wheeze without a sneeze. Now, let's see how big is the problem. We have seen that this is the most common condition for which medical care is sought, significantly causing widespread morbidity and significantly impairing the patient's quality of life. And the burden, the economic burden is also so huge. We can see that it represents a major health problem affecting 10 to 40% of patients. So considering the amount lost in healthcare and the amount lost in lost productivity, the economic burden is also so huge. How do you define allergic rhinitis? It's a IgA-mediated type 1 hypersensitivity reaction of the membranes lining the nose. So it's a type 1 hypersensitivity reaction characterized by nasal congestion, itching, rhinorrhea, sneezing, nasal obstruction. According to area guidelines proposed in the year 2014, the classification is changed as intermittent and persistent. Intermittent means less than 4 days per week or less than 4 weeks in a year, whereas persistent means more than 4 days per week and more than 4 weeks in a year. And this again is divided into moderate to severe or mild, depending on the severity of symptoms. Moderate to severe means there is abnormal sleep, impairment of daily activities, problems at school or work, and a lot of troublesome symptoms like the patient cannot indulge in sports or activities that they are interested in. Now, I'm not going into the details of the pathophysiology of allergic rhinitis, but when a patient is exposed to allergen, what happens is the allergen gets attached to the antigen presenting cells. So some of them becomes plasma cells and some of them becomes memory cells. And these plasma cells in the presence of interleukin 4, 5, 13 commonly, they produce the allergen specific immunoglobulin, which gets attached to the mast cell, and they resulting in degranulation of the mast cell. So the two important cells that involved in allergic rhinitis are in any allergy when there is a type 1 hypersensitivity are mast cells and eosinophils. So the degranulation of mast cells resulting in release of vasoactive amines, and these vasoactive amines are responsible for all symptoms of allergic rhinitis. When the patient is exposed to a second allergen, then all cascade of events occur more rapidly and will be more severe. So these are the mediators. Along with this, you have eosinophils and cytokines, which results in the symptoms of allergic rhinitis, the entire symptomatology of allergic rhinitis. And this is a very good study published in from Calcutta, published in 2014. The allergic rhinitis as a whole, you can divide into, in India, the blockers and sneeze runners. Blockers are much more than sneeze runners, 64.1% as against 35.9% in India. So sneeze runners are commonly those with seasonal allergic rhinitis. Now, when you consider rhinitis as a whole, allergic rhinitis constitute about 43%, and the mixed variety and non-allergic coming to the rest. So allergic rhinitis, you just cannot consider it as a standalone entity. There are lots of comorbidities associated with it, making the patient's life miserable and just difficult to manage. So you just can't say the population is affected by allergic rhinitis is so huge. You just cannot say that we are not interested in allergic rhinitis and we don't see allergy, because most of the patients coming to us will be in one or the other manifestation of allergic rhinitis. Need not be rhinitis alone. It can be asthma, which is a more morbid condition, recurrent ear infection, otitis media with effusion, chronic sinusitis and with or without nasal polyposis, upper airway obstruction compounding the symptoms of OSAs. And you can see nasal polyposis, a typical allergic fungal rhinosinusitis, and otitis media with effusion. And just a chronic nasal congestion can also produce a lot of symptomatology like dry, irritated throat or sore throat, snoring, mouth breathing, orthodontic disturbances, frontal headache, sinusitis, which is more common in blockers, and chronic cough. So the impact on quality of life is so huge that majority of children will have sleep disorders and learning performance disorders. And more than that, they have a lot of emotional problems and decrease in the cognitive functioning. So it's a significant detrimental effect on the patient's quality of life. This is another terminology than like asthma march or atopy march, which is usually which is proposed by Catani et al. And here it shows the natural course of events in allergy or the sequence of manifestation that can appear in allergic rhinitis. Initially, there'll be food allergy and dermal allergy, which later on develops into rhinitis and asthma. So majority of them or some of them will go on to develop allergic rhinitis and asthma. And if you treat them early enough, you can, to a larger extent, decrease or prevent the development of asthma. So atopic eczema appear first, followed by development of asthma and rhinitis. So allergic rhinitis is a powerful predictor of adult onset asthma. And it is a frequent cause for asthma exacerbations. So the most important factor is that effective rhinitis treatment either reduces or prevents the development of asthma. So that is the importance of early diagnosis and prompt management of allergic rhinitis. This is the usual allergy march, atopy of GI or dermal allergy, followed by upper and then lower respiratory. But there are several clinical variants. It need not be always like that. Eczema followed by asthma and rhinoconjunctivitis, or asthma, eczema, the reverse march, or it can be purely respiratory rhinitis to asthma. Now, what are the risk factors? We know that the genetic or the family history of allergy is a major risk factor. If one parent is having nasal allergy, there's a 30% chance. If both parents are having allergy, it's a 50% chance of getting allergic rhinitis in the children. And the genes involved are in the loci 5q, 11q, and 12q, which requires further investigation. 2/3 of patients have allergic rhinitis before the age of 30, and before the age of 10 years, boys are more affected than girls. Now, we do have an increasing incidence or prevalence of allergic rhinitis over the past few decades, globally increasing incidence. So what is the reason for that? It could be it is unlikely to be due to the changes in the genetic pool. Allergic rhinitis has to be considered as a lifestyle disease. And this, along with the emotional stress and pollution, all together play a major role for the increasing incidence of allergic rhinitis. The lifestyle disease means you have the homemade available food is now replaced by tinned and canned food, which has lots of additives, coloring agents, preservatives, which if introduced early in life can sensitize the child, and this can lead on to a Th2 allergic response, Th2 mediated response, which is responsible for the allergic rhinitis. And indoor allergens, then the pollution, the global warming, industrialization, along with the decreased infections, or the popular hygiene hypothesis, decreased exposure to microbes at critical development of immunological development. All these can lead on to increasing prevalence and manifesting it as a systemic disease. Now, allergy today, you have increasing pollution producing severe symptoms, indoor allergen producing persistent symptoms, and there are introduction of newer allergens every now and then, which results in a frequent symptoms. And stress is a common factor with the neuroimmunological responses making us more susceptible to allergy. You have in an Indian study, the most common allergens in blockers are house dust mite, and fungi, whereas in sneeze runners, it's mainly pollens. This is the concept of persistent inflammation. Some amount of hyperreactivity occurs in all patients, even though they are asymptomatic. When this level crosses the threshold, the patient becomes symptomatic. Now, coming to the clinical features, the episodic sneezing, watery rhinorrhea, nose block with itchy eyes, palate, pharynx. These are the common symptoms, but it's difficult to identify when there is perennial allergic inflammation. They present as stuffy nose, sometimes loss of smell, sinusitis, and eustachian tube dysfunction. Then anterior rhinoscopy will show a pale, usually will have a pale edematous mucosa with thin secretions. Clinical features, you have the typical allergic salute when the thenar eminence is rubbed against the tip of the nose, producing to wipe off the secretions. And then the transverse nasal crease known as Darius line, allergic shyness, that is the discoloration below the eye due to venous stasis, and Denny-Morgan line, there can be accentuated folds or lines below the lower eyelid. Overriding of maxillary incisors, open mouth, high arch palate, cobblestone appearance because of the chronic persistent postnasal drips. There can even be vocal nodules because of the frequent throat clearing. So coming to a broader view of symptomatology, you have a whole lot of nasal symptoms and a lot of non-nasal symptoms due to comorbidities. And patient can have sedation because of the allergic rhinitis itself, which deteriorates the quality of sleep, and some due to the sedation due to the treatment itself. All together leading on to poor cognitive performance and productive capacity of the patient, and the whole together will have a poor quality of life. So how do you diagnose? Coming to the history, we should take a proper family history, occupational history, environmental exposure, dietary history, and drug history. And don't forget to take symptoms of comorbidities. You have to have a complete general examination and complete ENT examination, and we should not forget to put the stethoscope onto the chest if the patient is severely allergic, having severe allergic rhinitis. And if the allergy is severe, send the patient for a pulmonary function test also. Then coming to the allergic rhinitis, allergic diagnosis, these are the differential diagnosis, which we all know how to differentiate allergic, vasomotor, and nasal, non-allergic with rhinitis with eosinophilia syndrome. When you look at the lab findings, you have eosinophilia in nasal cytology in allergic rhinitis and positive skin test or IgE, specific IgE test. Now, what are the tests? You have a lot of tests, which one to choose? We have skin prick test, which tests the specific IgE bound to mast cells, not the circulating IgE, which may or may not be specific. Now, the intradermal test has been almost condemned for the last 20 years because of obvious reasons like anaphylaxis, low sensitivity specificity. Then patch test. This is nowadays used only for contact dermatitis or drug allergy. And the challenge test is reserved for the research purposes and when you have an uncertain diagnosis where skin prick test is not very conclusive. And then you have total IgE, blood specific, serum specific IgE. So among this, skin prick test and serum specific IgE are the two tests that are considered useful for a patient diagnosis of allergic rhinitis. And among this, skin prick test is considered as a gold standard by all the organizations, the World Allergy Organization, European Academy of Allergy and Asthma and Clinical Immunology. All of them suggest skin prick as a gold standard. Why? This is the statement. This is a very important statement in clinical practice guidelines that clinicians should perform and interpret or refer to a clinician who can perform and interpret specific IgE, skin or blood, that is skin test or blood test to find out the specific IgE allergic testing for patients with a clinical diagnosis of allergic rhinitis who do not respond to empiric treatment. And when the diagnosis is uncertain, those who do not respond where the diagnosis is uncertain, and when the diagnosis of the specific causative allergen is needed to target therapy. So we consider skin prick test as the most important because it is there are several reasons for that. It's skin prick test is quick, cheaper, reliable, safe, sensitive, reproducible, and the patient himself can see the results, and it's all the way economical, more economical than the specific IgE blood test. Now, there's another test which is very time consuming, difficult, and needs to have extensive lab facilities. That is nasal allergen challenge test. This is rarely required, but it remains the gold standard. And the allergen is introduced in the nose, and any reaction is measured and compared to placebo. This is indicated when you have a positive history, but very strong positive history, but a negative skin prick test. And if the history is doubtful in occupational allergy and prior to initiating immunotherapy, you should have a definitive diagnosis. These are the only situations where you need to do a nasal allergen challenge. And this is a newer test like exhaled nitric oxide. Exhaled nitric oxide is a validated in non-invasive marker in asthma. Similarly, you have nasal nitric oxide, which is again a non-invasive marker, which can be utilized to monitor upper airway inflammation, but this is not properly validated till now. Now, coming to the British Society of Allergy and Clinical Immunology guidelines, it is similar, like you have a peak inspiratory flow rate, and then the allergy test, skin and serum specific IgE, and you can have additional tests like endoscopy and radiology, especially in comorbidities like sinusitis. And this is the recent study published in this year, 2020, which shows that patients with allergic rhinitis have significantly higher levels of eosinophilic cation protein, like the major basic protein, eosinophilic cation protein, and increased levels of IL-17 and IL-33 than in healthy controls. So this indicates that these can be utilized as a markers to diagnose and monitor the disease. And similarly, the inhibitors to IL-17 and IL-33 can be considered as a novel treatment strategy for management of allergic rhinitis, which is not being controlled by other measures. What is the significance of ECP or eosinophilic cationic protein? In eosinophilic cationic protein in nasal secretions of patients with nasal polyposis will be increased in the presence of asthma or aspirin intolerance, and similarly it will be increased in patients with severe nasal polyposis. So this again can be utilized as a to monitor the disease. Now, coming to the stepwise management of allergic disorders, you have allergen avoidance or environmental control, pharmacotherapy, immunotherapy, and surgery. And surgery is indicated only in a very few limited cases of patients. And when you advise a patient on surgery, you should put it in writing that surgery is not for surgery is not for the allergic symptoms. It is just for removal of obstruction. And we have very few surgeries like septoplasty, turbinate reduction, endoscopic sinus surgery, etc. Wherever it is indicated, but patient should be properly convinced the need for surgery and what is the role of surgery. Now, coming to allergen avoidance and environmental control, you have primary prevention, restrict the use of antibiotics, especially in the early phase of life, avoid smoking in pregnancy. There's a beautiful study from India itself, I think it's from Jaipur, where the incidence of allergic rhinitis is considered, assessed in smokers and non-smokers. In smokers, in non-smokers, it is 12.8%. Once the tobacco smoking comes in, it rapidly increases to about 55%. That is the magnitude of problem when smoking is introduced. So avoid smoking. It can be passive smoking or active smoking. So avoid smoking in pregnancy and promote breastfeeding. Secondary prevention, house dust mite, majority of patients, more than 55% of the patients will have house dust mite has a common allergen for persistent allergic rhinitis, moderate to severe. So you have to do whatever possible to remove to reduce the incidence of house dust mite within the houses. Remove carpets, soft toys, dried flowers, books, cushion, whatever accumulate dust has to be removed from the bedroom. And the soft toys can be cleaned with hot water, 55 to 60 degree, or it can be deep frozen within the kitchen fridge. Change sheet or pillow covers every 3 days, and you can sun dry the mattress and pillows every month for about 4 hours. Vacuum cleaning the blinds, the washing curtains very frequently, and the house dust mite impermeable mattresses and pillow covers are available, but they are very costly. If the patient can afford it, that can be used. This is a space study done in Europe, where 696 children with high risk of atopy, with at least one parent having confirmed risk of inhalant allergy, were given dust mite impermeable mattress as early as in the early phase of life, and there has been 4% decrease in sensitization to house dust mite, not only house dust mite, to egg and milk also. So you can, to some extent, practice allergen avoidance, though it's easy to say, but it's very difficult to practice. And cockroach extermination. Cockroaches are very highly proteinaceous and highly antigenic allergens, very difficult to manage also. Cockroach, mosquito, all these are highly proteolytic antigens. Now, pets, you have to ask them to, when you ask the patient, it's a very sensitive issue. When you ask the patient to remove pets from their houses, very conveniently they change the doctor rather than removing the pets from home. So you can tell them at least to remove pets from the bedroom, where you spend a lot of 8 to 12 hours of your of the day. So remove from bedrooms, and change of workplace, avoidance of particular foods. Food as a cause for allergic rhinitis is very rare in the sense, only in a study it has been proved that only 4.5% is responsible of food allergy is responsible for allergic rhinitis. So then rodent control, and if the patient is allergic when they go to gym or to the basement, it is more likely to be due to molds. So the atmosphere there will be very sweaty, humid. You can dehumidifiers can be used, or avoid going to such places. Now, coming to the treatment, these are the various levels of introduction of drugs. You can prevent sensitization, that is the best. Then prevention of IgA allergen interaction, prevention of mast cell mediator release, and blockade of mediator receptor interaction, and suppression of the resultant inflammation. So these are the various drugs acting at different levels. Allergen avoidance and immunotherapy are the best, which can remove the entire cascade of events. Then anti-IgE, steroids acts at various levels. It can act at the resultant inflammation, can reduce the resultant inflammation also. Antihistaminics acting at the receptor mediator interaction. So this is a basic, very simple treatment plan proposed by AREA. You can use oral or local non-sedative H1 blocker for mild intermittent. And if the patient is having moderate to severe intermittent or mild persistent allergic rhinitis, then intranasal steroid is the treatment of choice. And along with that, you can add drugs or and step up or step down to have a reasonably good control of allergic rhinitis. And immunotherapy is required in patients who cannot be controlled with drugs, pharmacotherapy, especially in mild persistent or moderate to severe persistent. This is a little difficult to read. This is the algorithm that we have published in Kerala State website, the management of allergic rhinitis. And this is an article published in recently, that is the Next Generation Allergic Rhinitis and its Impact on Asthma, AREA, Guidelines for Allergic Rhinitis based on grade and real world evidence. So you can plan a step-up algorithm in untreated allergic patient according to AREA guidelines. Here, If the visual analog scale, the symptoms are mild, VAS less than 5, you can initiate any treatment. Any in the sense, the first line, either oral antihistaminic or intranasal corticosteroids, or intranasal corticosteroid plus intranasal antihistamine. Intranasal antihistamine, what we usually use is acylastine. But acylastine is a bitter drug, very bitter to use.
Dr. Suma, ma'am,
Yeah.
1 minute. Dr. Suma, 1
Yeah.
minute. Someone has on YouTube also simultaneously, it is causing echoing. Can all of you mute your YouTube? So, echo.
Am I audible now? Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Now you go ahead, ma'am. Now it's okay.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when the visual analog scale or the patient is having mild symptoms, initiate any, like you can have an oral antihistamine or intranasal corticosteroid, or you can add intranasal corticosteroid with intranasal antihistamine. But it's always better not to combine intranasal antihistamine with intranasal corticosteroids, because intranasal antihistamine has a it's indicated only for the acute phase and the patient is severely symptomatic. So it need not be used for a longer period of time, and it has got sedation and it's a very bitter taste. Acylastine has got a very bitter taste. Patient won't, the compliance will not be that good, and it is not indicated also. So if you are planning to give intranasal antihistamine also, give it separately and then reassess. And if the patient is having visual analog severe symptoms, you can, if it is intermittent, you can try any of these. If it is persistent, intranasal corticosteroid should be added as a first line. And when reassess after 3 days, if the visual analog scale continues to be less than 5, then continue the treatment, and you can then consider step down and continue or stop. If it is more than 5, step up and reassess. If it is continues to be more than 5, even after the combination therapy, then you have to think of a specific immunotherapy later. Whereas in treated patients, say treated and symptomatic patient, if the visual analog scale is less than 5, similarly, you can step down treatment or stop, or maintain and step up if it is not getting controlled. Then reassess. If it is less than 5, continue the treatment, and then you can step down and maintain. If it is more than 5, step up the treatment and reassess again. If it is continues to be more than 5 or the patient is severely symptomatic, step up and reassess, and then plan for specific immunotherapy. This is a large Indian multi-centric trial done in several, including several teaching institutions all over India, comparing Avastin with Avastin and Montelukast combination. Avastin versus Avastin with Montelukast combination. That is simple antihistamine with versus combination. And in that study, they've come out with the clinical improvement is better with combination, and is the combination is well tolerated. But as far as possible, we have to try with the monotherapy, and you can add the drugs like anti-leukotrienes and then decongestants wherever indicated. And the intranasal corticosteroid continues to be the mainstay of treatment, and the most favored ones which has the least bioavailability are the mometasone and fluticasone, of which mometasone has the least bioavailability. That should be favored in children. And the current recommendations are against the routine use of leukotriene inhibitors in the treatment of allergic rhinitis as first-line agents. Leukotriene antagonists are added when there is asthma or it is not getting control with the usual intranasal corticosteroid spray with antihistamine. because the pharmacotherapy effects, when you check into the entire group of drugs which can be used, you can see that intranasal corticosteroids almost controls all the symptoms of allergic rhinitis. So it has to be favored as a first line treatment. Then the other drugs like anticholinergic, you can see the chromones has got very poor effect in the, it's not very effective, but it has to be given for several times a day, but it is very safe in children. And allergen avoidance and immunotherapy are the only treatment that modify the course of the disease. So the modifying the course of the disease, the only treatments that you can safely or with a reasonably good result you get is allergen immunotherapy, along with allergen avoidance, which is practically very difficult. Allergen immunotherapy is administration of gradually increasing quantities of an allergen vaccine to an allergic patient, reaching to a dose which is effective in ameliorating the symptoms associated with subsequent exposure. So you can have it either subcutaneous or sublingual. Sublingual is only recently FDA approved in 2015 December, and it is licensed for monotherapy. You cannot combine different classes of allergen together. In the intensive phase in subcutaneous, the intensive phase is twice a week subcutaneous injection for about 6 months, whereas the maintenance phase is once a month for 2.5 years. So they have to take one shot once a month for 2.5 years. And very often they don't mind getting a prick once a month rather than having all the combinations of drugs for a long period of time. And sublingual monotherapy, the intensive phase is twice a week drops for 12 months. And the maintenance phase is much longer. You have to have it once a week for 3 to 4 years. So many of the patients may not continue the treatment for the entire course of the illness. So now, what can we expect from immunotherapy? It is more efficacious than, the efficacy is more than when compared over the drug therapy, more efficacy, sustained efficacy and long lasting efficacy, sustained and increasing efficacy and long lasting efficacy. And most important is they prevent subsequent sensitization of allergens, and they reduce the development of immunotherapy reduces the development of asthma, and also the need for steroid in management can be reduced. But we have to have some immunotherapy that require far fewer treatments and over shorter periods of time. Now, what are the indications for immunotherapy? Not every patient with allergic rhinitis need immunotherapy. The indications are failure of medical management, where you need to give them step-up doses very frequently and still they are symptomatic. Poor quality of life. That is the most important indicator of specific immunotherapy. And recalcitrant allergic fungal rhinosinusitis needing recurrent revision surgeries. Now, coming to the contraindication, extremes of age. Even though age per se is not a contraindication, you can do it as in children as early as 3 years of age. Comorbidities, severe hypertension, uncontrolled hypertension, diabetes mellitus, and malignancy. Here you don't consider specific immunotherapy. And pregnancy is a relative contraindication again. If the patient, you don't start immunotherapy in a patient who is pregnant, but if the patient is already on immunotherapy, you can continue. Previous hypersensitivity to immunotherapy is a big no to specific immunotherapy. Now, treatment of comorbidities, you have chronic sinusitis as the major comorbidity. Around 68% to 70% of adults and 60% of children will have chronic sinusitis. And the treatment, the chronic sinusitis being an inflammatory pathology, the treatment is intranasal corticosteroid and saline irrigation. This has to be continued for 3 months and then you can reassess. If it is with polyp, before taking the patient for surgery, you can think of doxycycline 100 milligram OD for 3 weeks. Similarly, those without polyp, if the IgE is normal, macrolide antibiotic therapy for 6 to 12 weeks can be tried. Now we have FDA approved monoclonal antibody, anti-IgE, omalizumab, and mepolizumab, rocilizumab, which are anti-IL-5, interleukin 5. These are available. These can be tried in severe asthma or patients who cannot be controlled adequately with the drugs. Now coming to special situations like pediatric rhinitis, the only intranasal formulation licensed for very young child is sodium chromoglycate. But as I already told, this is the efficacy of sodium chromoglycate is very poor. So it's not a popular drug which is used, and it has to be given several times a day, which is difficult in a child. You can saline drops and sprays can be given, and from the age of now FDA approved mometasone use from the age of as early as 1 year of age, and mometasone, and more than 4 years you can give fluticasone also. Pregnancy, no medications are completely safe. Least absorbed nasal corticosteroid should be given. That is mometasone. I cannot complete my talk if the present crisis is not addressed to, because majority of patients present with upper respiratory symptoms, and the allergic patients are always always come with us, have a problem that they may be mistaken for, the symptoms may be mistaken for COVID-19. This pandemic has unfolded with a remarkable speed and unprecedented challenges, and otolaryngologist has a special role in the management of the crisis. But the problem is, even routine examination of nose and nasopharynx necessitates great care, and the risk is much more magnified with endoscopic procedures. Looking at the symptomatology, COVID-19 usually present with fever, cough, shortness of breath, and they don't have the usual allergy features like running nose or itchy nose, and with or without sore throat. Loss of smell as a marker of COVID-19, there are good evidence from South Korea, China, Italy, and Germany reported as high as 2 in 1 confirmed cases of COVID. And in South Korea, 30% are having this as a presenting symptom. But we don't get it as high as 30%. But when you interview them over phone, majority of them will have at least 1 or 2 days of anosmia before the onset of symptoms. Not majority, at least some of them. But this do not meet the current criteria for testing, and still early in our understanding to identify to definitely establish the association. Now, the intranasal corticosteroid has to be continued in patient with allergic rhinitis. That is the present statement of ARIA and EASEI. A patient with asthma should not stop inhaled corticosteroids, because when they stop it, asthma will aggravate, and the nebulization, such procedures are aerosol generating, and that has to be avoided as much as possible. So they should continue on inhaled corticosteroids. Now, COVID-19 is a major threat to mankind. Many of the healthcare workers are lost their lives. So we have to care ourselves as much as we care our patients, and precautions have to be taken in OPD. When you, for diagnostic swab or either oropharyngeal or nasopharyngeal, and all OP and endoscopic procedures of where ENT are involved are aerosol generating procedures. So we must be very careful to tackle this situation. To conclude, recognize the unified concept of nasobronchial allergy for early and proper management. And given the current understanding of disease, patients suffering from allergic rhinitis should expect marked improvement in the quality of life. And we must realize that allergy is treatable, and with prompt and early management, we can offer these unfortunate children with allergic rhinitis a healthy and allergy-free life. Thank you.
Suma.
Sir?
Oh, that was a very excellent talk.
Thank you,
And
sir.
the recent advances are really recent advances, very difficult to remember, like old people. Okay. Anyway, that the classification, the old classification was very simple, seasonal and perennial. Now we
Yeah.
have come to intermittent, severe, and again depends upon the mild uh, and severe, etc. And at the molecular level, so many innovations are there in the treatment of the allergy, and you have mentioned all this. So any safest drug during the first and second trimester of the pregnancy? The Belastin, what about? Some people are saying it is safe, some are saying it is not safe. Any information regarding the Belastin in usage in pregnancy?
Belastin is considered to be safer than other antihistamines.
Okay.
But no drug is definitely
So,
approved for use in pregnancy. Intranasal corticosteroids and can be continued. Mometasone or the systemic bioavailability is not much difference in mometasone and fluticasone. They can be continued throughout the day. But they have because of the hormonal effect, they'll definitely have some amount of nasal congestion, which is difficult to treat. So they
okay.
don't respond much with the nasal block will persist.
Okay. So it was very nice to mentioning about the COVID issues, because the many symptoms of the COVID are presenting to the ENT department with the symptoms of allergic rhinitis, so the running nose and nasal congestion and purchasal drip, etc. So that was all the practicing ENT surgeon had to remember that point in the daily OP treatment. Okay, I hope that there will be several doubts regarding this that Suma will ready to answer.
There are questions, sir. Ma'am,
Okay.
can you stop sharing so that people can see you more? Yeah. Sir, Dr. Ramchandra, sir, you will tell, shall I push the question to you? There is one question, Dr. Anand. Is there any role of surgery in refractory cases of allergic rhinitis with inflammatory changes in the nose?
Inflammatory changes in the nose.
Yeah.
Okay. The role of surgery, if there is chronic sinusitis, that the chronic sinusitis itself is an inflammatory process. So you have to have the treatment of intranasal corticosteroids continued for a long period of time. If there is no other structural problem and no definite evidence of sinusitis symptoms, you don't have to treat with surgery in an allergic rhinitis. But if they have severe frontal headaches, then you can think of surgery after all these two pharmacotherapy, continual of systemic steroid, intranasal corticosteroids, and as an added effect, for an added effect, you can think of surgery also. And that too, you can, if the serum IgE is normal, again, you can think of the 6 to 12 weeks of macrolides, azithromycin or clarithromycin.
Yeah. Ma'am, there's one more question. They're asking whether temperature, does environmental temperature has any effect on allergic rhinitis?
There are literatures showing that the global warming and increased temperature is one environmental factor that increases the incidence of allergy.
Okay. I'm not seeing any more questions. Ma'am, on the chat box. Let me see in the Q&A section. There are no questions. I'll just check in the YouTube also, ma'am. Okay. Right. There are no questions here also, ma'am. Sir, you would like, now one question has come, I think, ma'am. It's a comment. Thanks very much for very useful class, Dr. Anand Krishnan. Okay, yeah. Dr. Ramachandra sir, you would like to ask any more questions, sir?
Not much, no questions.
Okay. Ma'am, before you close, you can tell the people now the COVID situation, because how they'll have to take care of themselves. Because there is, yeah, as you rightly said, there are instances, many ENT, at least in Karnataka and other places, we have lost some good people, even in the ENT. So it may be that for 1 minute, if they don't use PP, that's what happened at Mysore professor. He just last minute, he was closing the clinic, the story goes, and the patient comes, somebody just known person. So he just saw, then he was positive, then doctor became positive, and we had doctor lost his life. So that 1 minute, being very careless, I can say in this case, or they just left the guard off. So can you just, Dr. Ramchandra sir is also there, some tip to all the youngsters, young ENTs, how they should be careful in this scenario?
I'm very sad to hear the news of Govinda Gowda sir.
Yes.
He was my teacher. I actually dedicate this talk to in memory of Govinda Gowda sir. He was such a nice person, and he was taking good care. So we were all worried how this happened. And I didn't know that this story.
This is, yeah.
I've seen his photo with all face shield, gown, and N95 mask, goggles, everything he was using. This is very important. There is no emergency in a pandemic. So you have to, even in OPD, you have to take care of your patient. You have to take care of yourself as much as you care for your patients, because that 1 minute of breach of PPE, appropriate PPE in every situation. When you are sitting in the OPD, it should be a well ventilated room with proper protection. Doctor's protection should be, and the history and all screening should be done before the patient is entering into the OPD. That I think most of the institutions are practicing that. So, and when you do a procedure, somebody should check that your PPE, there is no breach of your PPE at any point of time. And that should be very important. And all aerosol generating procedures should be very carefully tackled. That if you're doing an aerosol generating procedure, a complete PPE is a must.
Okay, right. Dr. Ramchandra sir, you were your last closing remarks, sir, before we actually close.
So this is a absolutely essential topic that every practicing ENT surgeon and the student have to remember the A to Z about the allergic rhinitis and the recent protocols in the management and the upcoming treatment schedules at the molecular level. And and in this COVID pandemic era, the precaution, as Dr. Sumas mentioned, very important to take all the precautions. You protect yourself first, and always keep a distance from the patient. And all the procedures you have to take utmost care while doing all this. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Ramchandra sir. Thank you, Madam Dr. Suma. So I just would like to tell the audience this program was done by Ebastin and Ebastinium. Ebastin is we are the basic manufacturer of Ebastin, both bulk drug and the formulation. And Ebastin is there in the market for more than 30 years, and there are several studies. It is there across 80 countries, more than 50 clinical trials, 30 years of clinical experience and real world experience is available. And then it has been used continuously in patients with urticaria for more than 1 year. And it has pharmacovigilance, a decade of pharmacovigilance has shown that it has the lower risk antihistamine with respect to adverse effect in terms of cognitive or psychomotor effect. And it comes with 10 and 20 Ebastin. So then Ebastin with Montelukast is also available. And this was also there for more than 10 years in India, but there were no Indian study with this combination, Avastin and Montelukast. So we did a large multicentric study involving 8 colleges, all majority of them are teaching institute, medical college across India, north, east, south, west, and we had 550 patients in this study. Then this summary of the study shows that there is a lesser TSS score in patients with Avastin but Montelukast, and there was significant TSS score in both the groups, Avastin individual group plus Avastin plus Montelukast group. But certain symptoms like nasal congestion and sneezing reduce much more. TSS score was much more in patients who were on combination things. And in terms of drug effectiveness, the Avastin and Montelukast had a better drug efficacy as assessed by the investigator as well as by the patient, and also in terms of quality of life score, there was significant improvement in both the groups. And in terms of sedation, there was no difference in the sedation in the both the groups. Both the similar, and the sedation was very less, and both the treatment were well tolerated. And in this study, we also had ECG adverse effect biochemical parameters. There was no difference in the ECG biochemical parameters, and safety was maintained, and all safety parameters, there was no significant difference from the baseline to this. So this study was concluded that this large multicentric trial confirmed that the combination of Avastin and Montelukast provides better clinical outcome, is well tolerated in management of allergic rhinitis in India. So that was the outcome of the study. The study was done with permission from DCGI and all the respective ethics committee. So it is in the process of publication. So thank you very much for patient listening and all the attendees, and I must thank the panelists also. Mr. Unnikrishnan, may I now request you to do official vote of thanks, please?
And nothing. All the seniors, especially Ramendra sir and Suma madam, are very close to us. Absolutely our well-wishers. Thanks for coming and doing an excellent program for on the name of Avastin. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, and I will come and meet you. And thank you, ma'am. Come and meet you. As told, excellent academic fees. Thank you so much. Manjula ma'am, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry my video is not available today. Thank you, Dr. Ramchandra, and thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Suma. Thank you to Dr. Manjula. She has been always very helpful, and it was a very good talk today, Suma madam. Thank you very much.
And thanks
Suma
all
ma'am,
the
thank you once
attendees.
again.
Thanks all the attendees. So there are still 31 doctors. So please thank
Yes.
all the participants for having made it and made this a
Very
successful
program. Thank you,
All the
everybody.
doctors who are on YouTube also, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you first.
Wonderful,
Thank you.
wonderful program.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste,
Thank
sir.
you.
Namaste.
And be safe, sir. Be safe, ma'am. Take care. Bye.
Okay.
Hello?
Right. I'll now pause the recording. Yeah, thank you. Stop. Okay. Thank you very much.